It started on a rainy Thursday evening, the kind where the wind slaps against the windows like a warning, and everything feels just a bit heavier than it should. I had just come home from work, drenched from the walk between the bus stop and our apartment. My job at the bookstore didn't pay much, but I always made sure to stay late and help with inventory because every little bit counted. My brother, Aaron, on the other hand, didn't have to worry about staying late or catching buses. He drove a car that Dad helped him buy, lived rent-free in the upstairs guest house, and had never once chipped in for groceries or the electric bill still. I didn't complain. I believed in pulling my weight and being responsible. But that night, as I stood just outside the living room, peeling off my wet coat, I heard voices drifting from within. My parents, their tone was serious. Hushed but not enough. Mom's voice, sharp as always when she thought she was being clever, said, "Let her handle all the bills. He deserves better." At first, I thought I misunderstood. But then Dad replied, "She's used to struggle. It builds character. Aaron, he's meant for more." The words slammed into me harder than any storm. I froze, my hands still on the zipper of my coat, my heart sinking deeper with every word. That was the moment the illusion shattered. Everything I had believed about fairness, support, and unconditional love unraveled like an old sweater, thread by thread. The days that followed were a blur of emotions I couldn't explain. I still did the dishes, still packed lunch for work, still paid the bills without fail. But now, every gesture, every act of care I offered felt tainted by the knowledge that it was expected of me, not appreciated. I replayed their words in my mind over and over again. She's used to struggle. He deserves better. As if struggle were a badge I had chosen, and he were some golden heir to be protected from reality. I remembered the times I helped Aaron with his homework. The nights I stayed up late so he could have the quiet space he needed to study. I remembered how I gave up college when Dad lost his job, how I took on 2 part-time gigs to keep the house running. None of it mattered now. I was the designated mule, the one expected to carry the weight while my brother floated free. It didn't take long before resentment started to brew like poison in the pit of my stomach. I didn't want to feel that way. I didn't want to hate my family. But how do you keep loving people who assign value to you only by how much you can give them? I tried confronting them gently at first. One Saturday morning, as Mom was slicing fruit in the kitchen, I asked if she thought I was being treated fairly. She didn't even look up. "Life's not fair, honey," she said, in that rehearsed tone people use when they don't want to admit guilt. "You've always been the strong one. Aaron, he's sensitive. Sensitive." That word again. It was their shield, their excuse for coddling him through every failure, every mess he created. I walked away from that conversation feeling like I'd swallowed glass. That night, I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking of escape. I could move out, start over, cut ties. But a part of me still hoped they'd come around. Maybe if I just worked harder, gave more, they'd finally see my worth. The irony stung. I was trying to earn love I should have had by default. Meanwhile, Aaron crashed his car and got a newer model the same month. When I asked for help paying for my wisdom tooth extraction, they told me to use my emergency savings. It was clear. I was their fallback plan, their financial crutch, their invisible daughter unless something needed fixing. The final blow came at Dad's birthday dinner when he raised a toast to Aaron, calling him the pride of this family. He didn't even mention me, not once. I didn't cry in public. I never did. But that night, as I cleared the table while Aaron played video games in the den and my parents chatted about his latest startup idea, something inside me cracked. I went into the laundry room, shut the door, and broke down silently against the dryer. My tears felt hot, like shame, like betrayal. I had given everything to this family, my youth, my dreams, my peace, and they had handed my efforts to my brother like offerings at an altar. I started noticing more things. How Mom smiled wider when Aaron walked in. How Dad saved his best stories for him. How my Achievements Employee of the Month, finishing a financial planning course online barely, earned a nod. It wasn't just neglect, it was erasure. One day while I was reorganizing the basement, I found an old photo album. Inside were pictures from every family trip, every birthday. In nearly all of them, Aaron was front and center. I was often on the edge of the frame, sometimes cropped out entirely. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I wasn't part of the narrative they celebrated. I was just the background character. That discovery became the seed of a decision that would change everything. If I was invisible here, maybe I could make myself visible somewhere else. I started applying for jobs out of state, quietly, methodically. I updated my resume, tapped into professional contacts I had met through the bookstore and my finance course. Within a month, I had 3 interviews. One company, a publishing firm in Chicago, offered me a position with better pay, benefits, and even relocation assistance. It felt surreal. For the first time in years, I had an option that wasn't tied to their approval. When I told my parents, their reaction was tepid at best. "Chicago's expensive," Dad said. "You sure you can handle that on your own?" Mom just pursed her lips and said, "But what about Aaron's birthday next month?" No, congratulations. No pride. Just subtle guilt and disappointment. Aaron didn't even acknowledge it. But I didn't care anymore. Their indifference didn't sting the way it used to. I had outgrown their grip on me. I packed my things over 2 weeks, organizing my life into boxes while still cooking dinner and folding laundry. They didn't help. In fact, they acted like I wasn't going anywhere. Maybe they thought I was bluffing. But on the morning of my departure, I left a note on the kitchen counter. It simply said, "Thank you for showing me what I never want to become." I walked out with a single suitcase and a rented car. No one followed. No one stopped me. Chicago was cold and chaotic, but it was mine. My apartment was small. The mattress sat on the floor for weeks, and the only decoration I had was a thrift store lamp, but I was happy. Free. I went to work every day with a fire I hadn't felt in years. My boss noticed my dedication and within 3 months promoted me to team lead. I made friends, found a community that didn't expect me to be less, so someone else could be more. Slowly, I began building a life that revolved around me, around compensating for someone else's shortcomings. The freedom was intoxicating. I explored museums, took solo weekend trips, even joined a writing group. For the first time, I saw my reflection not as the tired, overlooked daughter, but as someone worthy of being seen. Meanwhile, the texts from home were few and far between. Mom sent a message asking why I hadn't sent money for the electricity bill. I didn't reply. Aaron asked if I could co-sign a lease. I laughed for the first time in months. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I had cut the cord and it was holding up just fine. Still, part of me wondered if they missed me, if they even noticed I was gone. That answer came 6 months later, in a way I never expected. It was a Saturday when I received the email. The subject line simply read, "Urgent, from Mom." I hesitated before opening it. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, a mix of annoyance and curiosity building inside me. When I finally clicked, the message was long but carefully worded. Mom talked about how things had changed since I left. Aaron had quit another job. The bills were piling up and Dad's blood pressure was out of control. Buried within her paragraphs was the real request. Could I come back? Just for a few months to help out. Like you always do. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. After everything, they still saw me as a backup plan, a solution, never as someone with a life of her own. I didn't reply. I let days pass and more messages followed, first from her, then from Dad. Then finally a one-line text from Aaron. "You think you're better than us now?" That one made me laugh out loud. No, I didn't think I was better. I just finally believed I didn't deserve worse. I knew what would happen if I returned. I'd slip right back into the role they had assigned me since childhood. But I had built something solid, something beautiful, and I wasn't about to trade that for emotional servitude. A week later, I blocked their numbers. Harsh, maybe. Necessary. Absolutely. Time passed. Seasons changed. I met someone else, a photographer who ran community workshops. He was kind, present, and never once made me feel like I had to prove my worth. We started spending weekends together, exploring book fairs, late-night diners, and Sunday art walks. I told him everything eventually. About the house I grew up in, about the burden that never lifted, about hearing my own parents calculate my usefulness like I was a household appliance. He didn't interrupt or try to fix it. He just held my hand and said, "I'm proud of you for leaving." That meant more than any apology from my family ever could. One chilly December morning, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a wedding invitation. Aaron was getting married. There was a handwritten note in Mom's handwriting. "It would mean a lot if you came. Your brother misses you." No mention of her own regret. No acknowledgement of what drove me away. Just a subtle tug on the guilt strings. I showed the card to Elliot. "You going?" he asked. I shook my head. I wasn't invited as a guest. I was summoned as help. I tossed the card into the trash. That night, I lit a candle and wrote, "A letter not to send, but to release." I forgave them. But I didn't forget, and I didn't go back. A year later, my company nominated me for a National Leadership Award. The ceremony was held in New York, and they paid for my flight, hotel, and a guest ticket. I brought Elliot, who dressed in a dark suit and held my hand the entire evening. When my name was announced, I walked to the stage, confident and calm, in front of hundreds of people who knew me not as the reliable daughter, but as a leader, a mentor, and a professional. I gave a speech short, heartfelt, and honest. I spoke about resilience, about choosing your path when others try to write your story. I didn't mention my family by name, but the message was clear. Afterward, strangers came up to hug me, to thank me, to share their own silent burdens. That night, as I stood on the balcony of the hotel, award in hand and city lights stretching before me, I felt whole. Not because I had proven them wrong, but because I had finally stopped needing to. Elliot kissed my forehead and said, "I wish your parents could see you now." I smiled. They had their chance. Months later, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from an old neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, who still lived 2 houses down from my parents. She wrote that my mom had fallen ill and was in and out of the hospital. There was no request, no guilt, just an update. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to rush to the airport to be the daughter they never saw properly, but I didn't. I called the hospital instead, asked how she was, paid part of her bill anonymously. That was enough. That was my closure. I didn't need her, thanks, her recognition or her confession. I didn't need her to love me like she should have. I had learned to love myself better than that. I spent the rest of the evening journaling, not out of sadness but as a goodbye to a version of myself I no longer carried. The version that begged, that waited, that bled love without return. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had walked through fire and came out gold. Not because of them, but despite them, my life blossomed. I published my first book, ironically, a memoir about invisible daughters and the strength they grow in silence. It became a bestseller. Book clubs discussed it, podcasts invited me, and women from across the world messaged to say they saw themselves in my story. I never used real names, but those who needed to recognize the truth did. One evening, at a reading event, a young girl asked me, "Do you talk to your parents now?" I paused. "I don't," I replied honestly, "but I don't hate them either. Some people can only love you to the limit of their understanding, and sometimes that's just not enough." The room went quiet, then came applause. Not for the pain, but for the honesty. I didn't write the book to hurt anyone. I wrote it to heal myself, and in doing so, I helped others too. That was the redemption I never expected. I built a life out of the ashes of neglect, and it bloomed brighter than anything they could have imagined for me. Years passed, I never returned home. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not even for funerals. I grieved them quietly in my own way, not out of bitterness, but because some roots once cut can never be reattached. I traveled, loved, lost, and rebuilt. I lived, truly lived. I created a home filled with warmth, books, art, and people who saw me. No one ever told me to carry their burdens again. And if they tried, I politely declined. I had learned that boundaries are the highest form of self. Looking back, I don't regret overhearing that conversation years ago, the one where they decided I would carry all the weight because he deserved better. It hurt, yes, but it also freed me. It woke me up. And now, every time someone tells me I'm strong, I smile not because I had to be, but because I chose to be. My story isn't about being the forgotten daughter. It's about becoming the woman no one saw coming.